Daniel Brooks had learned to measure his days by doorsteps. Different houses, different faces, the same brown boxes and polite nods. It wasn't a bad life, just a quiet one. At 28, he worked long hours as a delivery driver, sending most of his paycheck back home to help his younger sister through college. Dreams were something he'd postponed, telling himself he'd come back to them later. That afternoon, the sky hung low and gray as Daniel turned onto a narrow residential street. His GPS chimed softly, guiding him toward the next delivery. He slowed the van, scanning the house numbers when something felt off. A faint smell reached him through the open window, sharp, bitter, unmistakable. Smoke. Daniel parked abruptly. Halfway down the street, a small two-story house stood wrapped in thick, dark smoke, pouring from an upstairs window. Flames flickered behind the glass like something alive. For a second, Daniel froze. His heart thudded hard as neighbors began stepping out onto their lawns, confusion turning into panic. Then he heard it. A child's cry. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise like a blade. Daniel didn't think. He left the van door open and ran. A woman across the street screamed that the fire department had been called, that help was on the way. But Daniel could still hear the crying, desperate and frightened, coming from inside the house. At the front door, heat blasted his face. Smoke seeped through the cracks. Daniel yanked his shirt over his mouth and pushed inside. The living room was chaos, burning furniture, alarms screaming, thick smoke choking the air. He dropped low, remembering something he'd once seen in a safety video. "Noah!" a small voice cried from upstairs. Daniel's lungs burned as he moved, each step heavier than the last. He followed the sound, gripping the railing as he climbed. Flames licked along the hallway walls, and the ceiling groaned ominously. At the end of the hall, a bedroom door stood half open. Inside, curled against the far wall, was a little boy, no more than 6 or 7, his face streaked with tears and soot. "It's okay," Daniel said, forcing calm into his voice. "I've got you." The boy nodded weakly as Daniel scooped him up. The heat was unbearable now. Behind them, something crashed as the fire spread faster than Daniel expected. He turned back toward the stairs and stopped. The hallway was gone. Flames blocked their only way out. For the first time, fear wrapped tightly around Daniel's chest. He held the child closer, shielding him as best he could, searching desperately for another escape as the fire closed in. Daniel's mind raced. The fire was spreading faster than he could process, each second chewing away at his options. He backed into the bedroom, coughing violently as smoke filled his lungs. The little boy clung to his jacket, shaking. "It's going to be okay," Daniel said again, though his own voice sounded unsure. He scanned the room, the window. It was their only chance. Daniel rushed over and slammed his shoulder into the glass. It shattered outward, cold air rushing in like a blessing. He leaned out and looked down. 2 stories. The ground felt impossibly far away. Outside, neighbors screamed when they saw them. Someone yelled that firefighters were almost there. Almost didn't feel fast enough. Daniel wrapped the boy tightly against his chest. "What's your name?" he asked, needing something, anything to keep the child calm. "Noah," the boy whispered. "I'm Daniel. Hold on to me, Noah. Don't let go." He climbed onto the windowsill, heart pounding so hard it drowned out everything else. For one terrifying second, Daniel hesitated. Then the heat surged behind him, and he jumped. They hit the ground hard. Pain exploded through Daniel's leg and shoulder, but he rolled instinctively, keeping Noah protected. The world spun, sounds blurring into chaos. Hands grabbed at them. Someone pulled Noah away gently. Daniel lay there gasping, staring at the sky as sirens wailed closer. Firefighters rushed past him into the burning house. He tried to sit up, panic flaring when he couldn't see Noah anymore. "He's okay," a voice said. Daniel turned his head. A woman knelt beside him. her face pale and streaked with tears. Her hands trembled as she clutched Noah to her chest. "I'm his mother," she said, voice breaking. "Emily, you saved my son." Daniel swallowed, pain radiating through his body. I heard him." Emily looked at him like he'd done something impossible, like he was someone extraordinary. She squeezed his hand, and for a moment, everything else faded: the fire, the noise, the pain. At the hospital, Daniel learned his leg was fractured and his shoulder badly bruised. He would be off work for weeks, maybe longer. The thought weighed heavily on him. No work meant no income. No income meant trouble he didn't know how to face. Emily visited the next morning carrying a small paper bag. Inside was a child's drawing, 2 stick figures holding hands in front of a house with a bright sun overhead. "Noah wanted you to have this," she said softly. Daniel smiled for the first time since the fire. Days passed. News of the rescue spread faster than Daniel expected. Local reporters called him a hero, but the word felt strange. He didn't feel brave. He'd just acted. When the hospital bills arrived, reality hit hard. Insurance covered some, but not all. Daniel stared at the numbers, anxiety settling deep in his chest. Then Emily called. "I want to help," she said. "Please, let me." Daniel hesitated, pride rising up instinctively. He didn't want charity, but something in Emily's voice, steady, sincere, made him listen. That call would become the first step toward a change Daniel never saw coming. Daniel was discharged a week later, walking with a brace and more uncertainty than he cared to admit. He returned to his small apartment, the silence heavier than usual. His phone buzzed constantly, messages from strangers, comments from people he didn't know calling him inspiring, brave, selfless. None of it paid the bills. Emily stayed in touch. She checked on his recovery, asked about his sister, listened without judgment. One afternoon, she invited him for coffee. Daniel almost declined, but something told him not to. Emily owned a modest but growing logistics company. She explained it carefully, not wanting to overwhelm him. "I know delivery work," she said, "but I also know how hard it is to move forward when no one gives you a chance." She slid a folder across the table. Inside was a job offer. Not charity, not a handout, but an opportunity. A position in operations, training included. Flexible hours while he healed. Daniel stared at the papers, throat tight. "Why?" he asked quietly. Emily didn't hesitate. "Because you ran into a fire for my son, and because I see potential in you." He accepted. The months that followed reshaped Daniel's life in ways he never expected. He learned quickly, absorbing everything. Emily mentored him, pushing him to think bigger, to trust himself. Noah waved every time Daniel visited the office, proudly telling anyone who would listen that Daniel was his hero. Daniel's confidence grew. So did his vision. 2 years later, Daniel stood in the same neighborhood where the fire had once raged. The house had been rebuilt. New paint, new memories. Emily and Noah stood beside him as a small crowd gathered. Daniel had started his own delivery company, one that hired people often overlooked, people just needing a second chance. Emily had invested early, believing in him when he hadn't fully believed in himself. A reporter asked Daniel how it felt, standing there after everything. Daniel looked at Noah, then at Emily. "One moment changed my life," he said. "But it wasn't just the fire. It was what came after. Someone choosing to lift me up instead of letting me fall." As the crowd dispersed, Daniel lingered, staring at the rebuilt house. He could still remember the heat, the fear, the sound of Noah's cries echoing through smoke. Some memories never faded, but they no longer haunted him. They reminded him why he did what he did. Later that evening, Daniel sat alone in his office, reviewing applications for his growing company. He paused at one resume, noticing the familiar signs of someone struggling but capable. He smiled and picked up the phone. "Let's give you a chance," he said. Across town, Emily tucked Noah into bed. "Do you know," she asked him gently, "how one choice can change everything?" Noah nodded sleepily. "Daniel saved me." Emily smiled. "Yes, and you saved him too." Years earlier, Daniel had thought his life would always be measured by doorsteps. Now, it was measured by impact, by lives changed, by opportunities created, by courage passed forward. And it all began the day he chose to run toward the fire instead of away from it.